All right, here is my rule number 2. So I just went over rule number 1 using the greater denominator. My second rule is multiply the denominators and find equivalent fractions for both. So 2/3 and 3/5 here. 3 and 5, 3 is not a factor of 5 and 5 is not a multiple. So we can't really use the higher fraction here because 3 times something wouldn't get me 5. So I can't use rule number 1. I can't use the first strategy here. So I'm going to use what's called the second strategy. And it says to multiply the denominators. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to say, what is 3 times 5? Well, that is 15. So I know that I can make 3, I can multiply 3 to be 15. And I can multiply 5 to be 15. So I'm going to change both of these fractions so that they have a denominator with 15 so that I can compare them. Okay, now I'm going to do that down here. 2/3 times something is going to give me a fraction with a 15 on the bottom. I'm going to do the same thing for 3/5. 3/5 times something is going to give me a fraction with 15 on the bottom. Okay? So I'm going to start with 2/3. Let me do a different pen here too so it looks a bit more colorful. So I have 3 on the denominator. 3 times what will give me 15? 3, 6, 9, 12, 15. 3 times 5 will give me 15. So since the bottom is 5, the top will also have to be 5 so that it can be my fraction of 1. So 3 times 5 is 15. 2 times 5 is 10. So my first fraction, 2/3, is equivalent to 10/15. And 3/5, so 5 times what will give me 15? That would be 3. And what's on the bottom must be on the top. So 3/3 is going to be my fraction of 1. 5 times 3 is 15. 3 times 3 is 9. So we are comparing literally 10/15 and 9/15. Look how close those two fractions were. If we were to draw these in a fraction strip, that would be really, really hard to tell. We would almost want to say, oh, they look pretty much equal, but they're not. They're really, really close. So 10/15 or 9/15, which is bigger? 10/15, which is equivalent to 2/3. So 2/3 is bigger. All right, we're going to move on to our next one. So we have 3/4 and 4/5. We're going to multiply the denominators. So 20. We're going to make 3/4 into a fraction with a denominator with a 20 on the bottom, and we're going to do the same thing to 4/5, okay? So 3/4 times something to give us a fraction with a 20 on the bottom, and 4/5 times a fraction to give us another fraction with a 20 on the bottom. I'm going to use a different pen now. Okay, so 3/4 to make something with a 20 on the denominator. 4 times what gives me 20? Well, that's 5. So that's going to be 5/5. 3 times 5 is 15. So 3/4 is equivalent to 15/20. 4/5, 5, 10, 15, 20. 5 times 4 equals 20. This is going to be 4 as well on the top. So 4 times 4 is 16. Look how close those fractions are. We have 15/20 and 16/20. So which one is bigger? That would be 16/20, which is equivalent to 4/5. Okay, so our next one, our last one we're going to do. We have 5/7 and 4/5. Since 5 isn't a factor of 7, 7 isn't a multiple of 5, the lowest denominator we can really find that's in common with these two is if we just multiply them. So 7 times 5 is 35. Okay, so 5/7 times something to give us a fraction with 35 on the bottom, and 4/5 times a fraction to give us something with a 35 on the bottom. Okay, so 7 times what will give me 35? That would be 5. So our fraction of 1 is 5/5. 7 times 5 is 35. 5 times 5 is 25. 4/5. Okay, 5 times what gives me 35? That would be 5 times 7. So our fraction of 1 is 7/7. 4 times 7 is 28. So I'm comparing 25/35 and 28/35. It's pretty close. But if you have these two fractions, if you're comparing them, 28/35 is bigger than 25/35. So 28/35 is equivalent to 4/5. So 4/5 is my greater fraction. And that is rule number 2.